Okay. Um, you can see that we're going to be focusing on this topic that we introduced the last time, where we've given our definition for critical thinking. We've talked a little bit about what it involves by looking at that rubric, and we've considered why we think it's important. Now we're going to begin looking at these specific actions that we can improve in order to be better critical thinkers. And we're starting with this idea of learning independently, learning how to learn for ourselves. Yesterday, we introduced Will Richardson as a thinker on this topic, and we read his a short piece from his book. We're going to review that same idea today, and we're going to look at some of the skills that his son Tucker was demonstrating, and then connect those to some higher order skills that a group of English teachers have put together. So I want you to take a moment and try and remember what we ended with yesterday as we evaluated Will Richardson as a source. So we thought about both his credibility and his expertise, and then we tried to find some details in this biography that show those for us. So in a moment, I'm going to put you in a breakout room, and with your small group, you're going to redefine these words from yesterday and try and identify some of the pieces in the biography that you think show he's both credible and an expert. So take about 30 seconds and look over this to begin with, prepare what you're going to share, and then I'll assign you to some rooms. Okay. Head out to your rooms. I'll bring you back in about a minute. Hopefully that you remembered that credibility means if someone is reliable or if they are trustworthy. Can we accept that the information they give us will be accurate? Expertise is looking at whether or not they have special knowledge or training on this topic that makes them more useful to listen to than an ordinary person. And in this case, we pointed at some of these details, that he's credible because he's got a good reputation and that he is published by an organization that others consider to be top-notch. And so they're kind of putting their reputation behind him. He's an expert because in addition to being a parent of his own, he's also worked as a teacher and in a company that looks at education and how we learn. And so that shows he spent a lot of time studying these ideas. We're going to make evaluating our sources a major part of this year. One of the themes that we're going to focus on is the idea that finding better information helps us to make better decisions. And so that's really important. If you
Friends.
remember yesterday, we talked about how um, Tucker, his son, had to figure out this game of Minecraft. And we read
Men are
through,
hairy.
hold on, let me see who's needs muted here.
James.
And so we read this little passage from Why School, and then we went in and found these actions that he took that we think are examples of good learning. And so take a moment, try and think about the bigger skills that each of these things represent. The example I gave you yesterday was how when he went to Minecraft.net, that's this bigger skill that students can use in any circumstance where you're able to find relevant websites, which means they're on the right topic, and then you're able to evaluate them for yourself to decide if they're really credible. We mentioned that using the company website is going to be better than going to some random Google search, which might just be some kid's like social media feed about what they're doing on Minecraft. And maybe that kid's really, really good, but maybe they're also like a crazy person who's just trying to mess with you. And so it's harder to be sure. But if you go to websites that have an established reputation, that can be helpful. I want you to do the same thing, though I don't want you to use the example I just did. I want you to pick one or two of these actions and think about what bigger skill it represents when it comes to learning. What I'm going to do is put you in another breakout room, and I want you to share what you are thinking. How could you generalize this to be a skill that any middle schooler could use in a lot of different environments? Tyler, we're thinking back on what we were doing yesterday. So if you remember, we ended with this story about Tucker figuring out how to play Minecraft. And we are thinking about how the actions that he took represent these bigger skills that young learners can use as they try and understand the world around him. And so I gave one example of how going to his website helps us to think about the importance of finding credible sources that are on topic rather than just like Googling things and hoping that a good answer pops up at the top. And so the students right now are in some breakout rooms. They're sharing some of their ideas for how they would explain each of these. I'm going to pull them back in a moment, and then we're going to look at another expert group's idea. Okay. So what we're going to do to look at a more fancy version of this, to consider some of these same skills from a group of experts, we're going to look at something from the NCTE. In social studies class with Mr. Wagner, you might have examined some sources from the NCSS. That's the National Council for Social Studies. The NCTE is this National Council for Teachers of English. So it's this group of English teachers, people like Arcuff, who work together to share ideas and publish resources for teachers and students about learning and language arts, reading, writing, and speaking. And what they did is they put together this panel of experts to identify some of their own lists of essential skills. And so this is definitely a good source to use. And these are the skills that they came up with, many of which are similar to what Tucker was doing. Take a moment, read what's on screen. You can tell that this is written the way that someone like Ms. Karkoff probably talks and writes. You know, these are English teachers who are producing these, and so they're using some complicated vocabulary and complex statements here. And our goal should be to try and boil them down a little bit. And so what I'm going to do is put you in another breakout room with two-ish people. I want you to choose one skill from the list, and I want you to work together to try and put it into simpler words. So you're trying to kind of boil this down to the essence. Think of it as a way like you want to explain this how a fifth grader would understand. If you have a piece of scrap paper handy, you can jot down your thinking so that you have this because you're going to share it with others in a few moments. If not, you can just kind of practice it with your partners and be ready to restate it in a different group a little bit later on. So again, you're just picking one item from the list and trying to simplify it. Let me recreate a few more rooms here. I might rearrange a few of you once I open these, but for now, off you go. Okay, now I'm going to put you in some new rooms with a few more people in them. Some might be the same as you were just with. It's a little too complicated to fix that. Your goal is to share what you came up with. So you're going to either read or just kind of wing it on how you simplified the statement. Don't tell your group mates the number, just give them your statement and then see if they can guess which number it matches with. And so we'll see if you were close enough that it makes sense to them. Okay. Now I'm going to share a few of my examples and we're going to see if you can match them up. So take a moment, read the one that I have up on the top, and think about which number in red down here you believe it matches with. If you can, in your chat box, plug in the number you think this one goes with. The key word here, and why a lot of us, I think, are getting this one wrong. So many of you are saying number one, but actually the correct answer is number four. And the key word is this idea of ethical. Ethics is when you understand right and wrong. And so we need to know what behavior is appropriate and acceptable and what is not when we are online. And as difficult as that can be when you are in person with others, sometimes it's even harder online. This is why there's so much bad behavior out there. And why we need to be really careful in the way we act and who we interact with and what we do. I'm going to have us repeat this same process maybe 2 or 3 more times. What I'm going to do is send you into one last set of breakout rooms, and I'm going to put one of these up at a time on the screen. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to talk it through with your group mates as far as which ones you believe it matches with. And then I'll pull you back here and we'll go over all of the answers. Okay, I know that was a little fast, cut it close with our time here. And so I wanted to make sure I could go over the answers. When I'm looking at these, I would say this critical thinking about being careful with sources matches with number 5, that we can use all kinds of sources critically and carefully as we go online. This would match with statement number 2, that we can work with others. We can find good networks of people that we can connect with in order to solve complicated problems. And then the final one was that we can, number 3, synthesize, which means pull together and make inferences about multiple different sources. That's one of the great parts about having so much online access, is that there's almost limitless information at our fingertips. Tomorrow, we'll review these again really quickly and think about how we can start to practice these when we are learning both in class and on our own. And a lot of them overlap with the same critical thinking skills we've already introduced. Thank you very much for your attendance on the Zoom. Your next class starts at 10:05, so you can head off to there.
Excuse me, I have a question, Mr. Angelini.
Yes.
So I have study hall next. So what will that kind of look like?
Basically nothing. You have a free 20-some minutes here.
Okay.
Okay.